Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday Night Live show at Jonny Lipsham Studios. I'm Jonny, just in case you weren't aware of that by now. You should be, but there we go. Just a quick heads up to start with. I have a really sore throat, so I don't know how long we're going to last. It's come on maybe the last 2 or 3 hours, and I was kind of reluctant to cancel the show. Just simply because I hate cancelling Sunday Night Live. But, you know, needs must sometimes. But I decided, no, I'd see how long I can go for. And I didn't mean to say how 3 times there. But there we go. So that's why my voice sounds like it's a whole octave lower than it should be. And that's because it is at the moment. And it's really quite sore. I have tea sat right next to me as usual. But yeah, I'm going to try and go as long as I can before my voice completely gives up on me. So I apologize for any coughing in advance and my voice breaking up as well, because it's going to happen. But we've got a good few familiar faces through the door already. Kyle was the first one in the door. He says, hello, everyone. And Ken Moss followed him very quickly by saying howdy-ho, and then you guys have been having a Cab Calloway joke to yourselves, which is very cool. Cab Calloway is awesome, by the way, just in case you don't know who he is. He was a big band leader, kind of at the start of the bebop period. A very young Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker were both in his band, and incidentally, that's kind of where they met. They met in Cab Calloway's band. And from there, they started developing what would become bebop. So there you go. That's Cab Calloway. And he had a massive, huge hit with Minnie the Moocher, which is a hilarious song and features all sorts of references to all sorts of fun and amusing substances and ways to spend your time. All right, so who else do we have here? We have David is here. Mika, of course, is here. Good to see you, Mika. Thank you for coming. And Thomas is here. And Mike is here. He says howdy-ho as well. Bob Studios says, sorry, took me a bit to get in. Well, don't worry. I took a little bit getting going. So don't worry. We've not really started. Dave says, don't force it, Jonny. If you have to call it off, we'll understand. Well, let's just see how we go, huh? And we'll just take it one wee bit at a time. So the intent of tonight's show really was to... hey, Deer Creek. He's just walked through the door as well. The intent of tonight really was to talk about 3D mixing. I don't really know if that's a thing or not, or even if that's what you call it. But essentially, I wanted to talk about how we can attain getting the front to back perspective of our mixes, as well as the stereo width perspective of our mixes, and ways in which we can achieve that. So most of the time, when I'm thinking about the front and the back of the mix, as well as the left and the right, I'm thinking about different ways in which I can achieve that and techniques I can apply to achieve that. And also I'm thinking about what elements need to be at the front and what need to be further at the back. So when I'm mixing, I tend to visualize my musicians as if they are on a stage performing. But I don't necessarily pan strictly as if they're on a stage. I employ LCR panning for the most part. And then, certain elements will come in a little bit from extreme left and extreme right sometimes. Depends where I want them. But for the most part, I'm a hard left, hard right, right up the middle kind of guy. And that's just the way I like to do my panning. So panning kind of takes care of a lot of your width, but also reverbs will help you, reverbs and delays will help you get that as well. Another cool thing about reverbs is that reverbs have this tendency to push things further back in the mix, make them sound a little bit further distant, rather than really up front. The drier a signal is, the more up front it's going to sound compared to something else in your mix. So I tend to use reverbs strategically. I'm not a big fan of reverbs, mostly because I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, and a lot of 80s music featured lots of reverb, and I'm not a fan of reverb. I suppose possibly because of a reaction against excessive amounts of reverb, such as anything that Phil Spector was ever involved in. Not a big fan of it. I totally understand why the Beatles didn't like the work that he did on their records, and they released their own versions of the record that he was involved in, with all of his quote-unquote wall of sound stuff taken off, because it was just way too much. So I use reverbs very subtly, very strategically. The idea, for me anyway, of reverb is to use reverb to push something further back in the mix, rather than to use it for an effect. So my reverbs tend to be felt rather than heard. That's just the way I like them. Occasionally, if I'm mixing something that is a little bit more airy and a little bit more of a ballad or something like that, or there's a lot of emotion involved in the song, then maybe I'll turn the reverbs up a little bit, and I'll employ a little bit more, make them a little bit more obvious. But for the most part, I'm pushing them a little bit further back, and bury them a wee bit in the mix so that they are felt rather than heard. Delays, on the other hand, I'm a little less subtle with. I'm not as obvious about reverbs as someone like Graham Corcoran is. Graham is a good friend of mine, but he does use delays very overtly. I don't. Excuse me. I'm quite subtle about ambient effects, so I use a delay mostly to give something like a lead vocal something unique and special about it. So I may not put a delay on a guitar. I may not put a delay on anything else except for the lead vocal. And that's just to give the lead vocal a sense of width about it, as well as being up front. I like it to have a sense of presence, so the vocal is big in the stage, so to speak. So ambient effects will get you a long way to getting that front to back kind of thing. So, but another technique that you can employ is how you use compressors. Compressors are great for this. Now, a lot of times we would employ a compressor to do one thing and one thing only. Certainly when we're starting out, we would tend to employ a compressor to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to control that dynamic range of whatever it is, whatever source it happens to be working away on. So we might control the snare drum so that the snare drum doesn't get too out of control. We might control the kick drum for the same reasons. We might tame a very vigorous strumming acoustic guitar part, or a vocal, so that we're not having to do so much automation on the vocal. I'm not a big fan of automation either, you will find out. And so what I find with compressors, and I've learned this kind of by osmosis rather than really actually sitting down and specifically having somebody sit down with me and say, okay, this is what a compressor does. I've kind of learned it by osmosis over the years. And so I suppose the way that I apply compression is not necessarily the way everybody else would. So what do I do with compressors and compression to make something sit further back in the mix or to make something sit further up front? This is where attack and release are the biggest weapons in the compressor. Because if you have a faster attack, it's going to clamp down on the transient quicker. And what that will do is you can use that to put something further back in the mix. So you can take backing vocals and you can give them a faster attack than your lead vocals, and that on its own will push them a little bit further behind the lead vocal. If you put a slower attack on the lead vocal, then the lead vocals transients come through more than the backing vocals. That in itself will allow the lead vocal to sit on top. So strategic use of attack and release is going to help you get that front to back thing going on. So drums, I would probably use much more of a fast attack style of compression so that I'm having them sit back a little bit. Unless the song requires the drums to be much more up front, then, I will go for a slower attack style of compression. But yeah, I'm fair. That's kind of like my compression strategy. I'm not just doing it to control the dynamic range. I'm using compression to push things back or to bring things up front as well. And again, bit of reverb always helps as well. If I want the drums to sit really, really, really far back, then I'll use some reverb on the drums. I like my drums to be pretty dry, to be honest. But if necessary, I will put some reverb on there to help them to go even further back in the mix. It kind of depends. But these are strategies that I employ to get the front to back thing happening, is compression and how I use reverbs. Those are my two big weapons. There are many, many others, and we could talk maybe for 2 or 3 hours, to be honest, about this whole idea of 3D mixing. It's not really 3D mixing. It's kind of depth of field perception that you give the listener. And it's a particularly, kind of when you've moved beyond beginner phase and into the intermediate phase and you're starting to really move through the gears in terms of your mixing skills, when you really have a handle on your strategic use of attack and release compression and how you use reverbs strategically to set things further back as well. Mika says, let's not forget that the quality and variations of reverb since the advent of high quality digital such as Eventide, TC, etc. have changed the entire nature of the use of reverbs today. That's very true. Yes, certainly compared to the 1980s when, we didn't really have a lot of digital reverbs around, and actually some of the quality of the digital reverbs that were available in the 80s were pretty awful. I quite agree with that. But yes, I'm not a massive fan of any reverb. Bob Studio says, interesting on the compression, but as I recall, when I used Dolby, yes. Yeah, Dolby's another thing. Depth of field, better call. Yes. Depth of field is definitely a better thing to call it than 3D mixing, because it isn't really 3D mixing. I just had to come up with a snappy title that would encapsulate what I wanted to talk about tonight. So I have pulled up in Studio One here, if I can just go over to it, my remix of Paper Deity from my 2016 EP Belonging to Tomorrow, where I have really kind of tried to be strategic about how I use compression to take this mix to the next level. Now, my original 2016 mix was good, but it was a little bit flat. It wasn't just that it was a little bit dark, it was also a little bit flat. My 2016 mix has a little bit of a bump around about 400, and to be honest, that was more to do with the room that I had at the time. Those of you that have been watching my live shows since the early days will remember that I had a really small room. Now, that room had a little bit of a standing wave issue around about 400, and it was really quite hard to mix around it. And I did my entire 2016 EP in that room. So everything was recorded in that room with that particular issue, and then of course mixed in that room with that particular issue as well. So what ended up happening was those mixes just sounded a little bit dark. But my mix of Paper Deity in particular was a little bit flat, in that there wasn't a whole lot of depth of field. There was some, but there wasn't a massive amount of depth of field. And so when I came to redo this mix for the video series that I did earlier in the year, the approach that I took was to be a little bit more strategic about how I involved compression in particular. For example, I went to town with parallel compression, which is something I had not done on my 2016 mix. My 2016 mix, I kind of set myself a little rule that I was only going to use one EQ, one compressor, one reverb, and one delay. Those are the only effects I was going to allow myself to use. And so that's what I did with that mix. Whereas this time, I gave myself a lot more freedom. I involved some third-party plugins, like the Brainworks Opto compressor, which I used on my lead vocal and the Fat channel using the 1176 and LA2 style compressors, plus my de-esser from Plugin Alliance and a few others. And I think what we ended up with was something that's a lot brighter sounding. And also the way I used compression was I think better, because I worked hard on this kind of depth of field approach to my mix. So I'm going to let you hear a wee bit of the song. And Mika says, let's be honest, the drums used on Paper Deity were dark. Yes, they were. They were very dark. But that's kind of the nature of those 1960s Ludwig drum sets. They were dark. Particularly with Remo Ambassador drum heads, which is what I had at the when I recorded those drums. Yes, they were dark, and the cymbals were dark as well. They were all K Zildjian, and the original K Zildjians are very dark. If you've ever heard one of those K Zildjian rides from the 1940s, which is the ride cymbal that is featured on that song, and in fact the whole EP, because we used the same cymbal set, that was my grandfather's ride cymbal. And it's an original 1938 or 39 K Zildjian ride cymbal. So, and it's dark. And of course, all the other K Zildjians that came along after it, and then you've got the Constantinople series that came out a few years ago. They're dark still, but they have a lot more. They have I think a better frequency response overall than the original K Zildjians. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject that I don't want to get into, because I could get into talking about cymbals for a very, very long time. So don't want to do that today. Mika says, it has its place, but better to start a tad brighter and then bring them down. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, that was my drum set at the time. I don't have that Ludwig drum set anymore. That's gone to another studio that had need of a drum set. So I have loaned them kind of semi-permanently my Ludwig drum set, and what I use now in the church, which is where I recorded all the drums and then ended up using a little bit of sample replacement, is a Sonar drum set. And I forget which model it is. But anyway, there we go. That's the drums. The drums were pretty dark. So you're going to hear that they're still pretty dark on here, but I have brightened them up a wee bit. And I think the benefit is with this particular mix was that I mixed it in my new room. Excuse me, which is obviously much bigger and does not have the issue at 400. So I was able to mix things a little bit better. So anyway, let's play a wee bit of this.
Another grace flashes past the window on the 13th floor. One more sad life crashes, broken by the yearn for more and more. Another spin of the wheel
Okay, we had some crackles going on there. Not sure what that was all about. I need to go and check. Hang on. Oh, that'd be because my CPU is absolutely massively spiking its trousers off. Which is something it doesn't normally do. That's annoying. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I'll try again, but let's have a listen to it without actually any plugins on at all.
Another grace flashes past the window on the 13th floor. One more sad life crashes,
Let's turn them on.
by the yearn for more and more. Another spin of the wheel, roll of the dice, or ace on the turn.
So there you go, and you can hear the vocal kind of panning a little bit there. So so I paid much more attention to depth of field with this this particular mix. Now, as you can see, I'm not doing a whole lot of hard left, hard right panning, particularly with the backing vocals and the horns. I wanted these guys to be fairly close up to the middle. Had I had a bigger horn section on this song, I would have done a lot more LCR style panning, to be honest. Backing vocals, I like to have backing vocals kind of surrounding the lead vocal. So if we go to where the backing vocals come in, so we'll go just before, and we'll have a listen to what those are like.
In God we trust, says on the bill, from boom to bust.
So the idea here is that I'm wanting the backing vocals to, let's just solo all of these up. I'm wanting the backing vocals to kind of surround, as if everybody's gathered around the same microphone, was my idea for this. So let's play that same section again.
In God we trust, says on the bill, from boom to bust.
Okay, so there we go. So the idea was that I didn't want these all kind of LCR style panning. Hang on a second. There you go. So yeah, I didn't want LCR panning for my backing vocals in particular. But I did like this idea of close harmony. Excuse me. As you can hear, I've gone for kind of like close, almost saxophone section style, swing band era saxophone section, close harmony. That's kind of one of the things I really like. So I wanted these guys to surround the mic. But here's the thing with the whole compression thing. Backing vocals are really important to this song. So I did not want these guys to be sat like really far back or even moderately far back. I wanted these to be fairly upfront, but not as upfront as the lead vocal. So let's go and take a look at the what we've got going on with my backing vocals. Let's no, didn't want to press that button, but that's okay. So on the compressor over here, we're just going through an LA2A. So we're getting some nice smooth compression here, and I've opened up some of the mids, and yes, there is this massive cut here at 390. This is where a lot of the build up in my original mix was, so I pulled a lot of that out. But compare that to the lead vocal here. If we open up the compressor here, we're going through an LA2A. We're going through this vintage style EQ, opening up a lot of the top end. I really like the top end on this particular EQ. Brightens it up an absolute bunch, which is great. And then cutting out, again, that 360 kind of area. But then we're going into this guy, the Brainworks Opto style compressor. And I really like the tone of this guy as well. It's got a little bit of a high-pass sidechain thing, which is not engaged in this. I've maybe used this if I wanted to avoid triggering the low end in particular. And then we've got this set on, I think this is slow. I don't actually really know whether it's fast to slow or slow to fast. But I cranked it all the way over this way, and it just sounded really good. and I'm only tapping this guy a little, maybe 2 or 3 dB. And then on the other one, I'm only doing 2 or 3 dB. But there's only one compressor on the backing vocals, but there are 2 compressors in series on the lead vocal. And that, for me, enabled me to get these, get the lead vocal and the lead vocal double nice and up front, and get these guys sitting just a little bit off. But then they're both going through parallel compression channels. And the lead vocal is going through this sort of Fairchild style compressor, which sounds absolutely lovely. And the BVs are going through the same, just slightly different settings. And I've got these set on the fastest. And it just sounds really great. But as I say, I have everything kind of gathered around the same mic. That's kind of the idea for me. Although with some other mixes that I'm doing at the moment, I have the backing vocals set much further back than I have here. And the other thing to notice here is that I have the lead vocal going through a delay and a little hair of a reverb. And then the backing vocals are not going through the delay, they're going through a reverb as well. They're going through the same reverb, but I'm just sending more of the backing vocals into the reverb, again to help set them further back in the mix. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat so that I can keep up with it. Hold on a sec. Let's see. Snidely, what's that name? Snidely Whiplash? I think that's your name. Says, sounds Peter Gabriel-ish. I like Peter Gabriel. Sledgehammer is one of my favorite songs of his, actually. I just love the vibe and the groove of that song. And the mix is just epic. And it features one of my favorite drummers, French drummer Manu Katché. And it's just an epic, epic song. Horn arranging on that song is really, really good, really effective. And the music video was just revolutionary, in my opinion. But it's a really good song. Really like it. And I like a lot of what Peter has done over the years as a solo artist, not necessarily with Genesis, but with on his own. Bob Studios says, yes, at 400, it seems to be an issue with better mics for vocals. Yeah, at the time I recorded the vocals through a Behringer condenser mic, and I think that kind of is quite a dark sounding mic anyway. And so in that room with the acoustic issues that were in there, and it was a treated room, but it just had an issue at around about 400 that I just couldn't get past. It didn't matter what treatment I put up, I just couldn't get past this particular frequency point, and the fact that that mic was a little bit dark anyway. So kind of that contributed to a lot of the way the vocals sound on this song. So being able to, in a bigger room with a better microphone, kind of do a little bit of sweetening and tidying up. I redid the double vocal. I didn't redo the actual lead vocal. I just redid the double with a Rode NT1A in this room. Just to help brighten the vocal up a little bit more. And then, of course, just kind of being able to be a bit more open about mixing in this room, because it's a better room for mixing. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better. Let's see. OPP said he just used delay. My bad. Yes, needs some subtle delay. Yeah, I tend to use delays on lead vocals, and I tend to use reverbs on backing vocals. That's probably just a very bad habit of mine, but that's what I do. David said, when I mix this, I use the Waves MV2 to even out the levels and then an LA2 after it. Yeah, that's a good option as well. I don't have the MV2. If I did, I probably would have made that choice as well. Good choices there. Mark Riviera, Billy Joel's sax player, said playing on Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer was the most fun he'd had with his clothes on. I read that as well, actually, in an interview. They all had a ton of fun on that song, and you can tell everybody had fun recording that song, because the sense of fun totally comes through on the recordings, and it obviously means therefore that the mix engineer has a lot of fun too, because the recordings are just totally infused with a sense of fun, and Peter's arranging style for that song was just clearly this song is just totally about fun, which is obviously a thread picked up by Nick Parks, the animator for the music video. Picked up on that as well. Snidey says if you put some verb on the vocals, it'll sound more Snake Charmer like. Okay, interesting. I do believe there is some reverb on the vocals. Yep, we are definitely going through a reverb there. I have a little bit of a send, -30, going to my room reverb. I've got more going through, as I said, more going through the backing vocals. That helps with that kind of 3D perspective. Pushing the backing vocals further back. Again, more reverb on the horns because I didn't want them to be too massively up front. And the same with the guitars. I've got them going through a little bit, and the Rhodes going through just a little bit, just to... the idea with the reverb on the Fender Rhodes... Let's just take a listen to the Fender Rhodes on its own. Oh, and the Hammond organ. Yeah, I wanted to bring... I'd forgotten that I had the Hammond organ going through the keys bus as well. I wanted to bring out some of the sparkle of the Hammond organ and some of the attack of the Rhodes, and I figured I could do that with just a hint of reverb, and again with the way I used compression on these two guys over here as well. And these guys have got a little bit of brightness going on. Hammond, I've got some 5K boosted and a little bit of 1.5 and a high pass filter, and then the Fender Rhodes. Fender Rhodes is quite a dark sounding instrument anyway. So I'm pulling out 364 because that's where you get a lot of the muddied build up on a Fender Rhodes. It's just the way the instrument's designed. Open up the mids, and I'm not doing anything at the top end because there's not really anything up here to do anything with. So leaving that pretty flat, and I'm boosting 1.5 and about 2.5, nearly 3 there as well. And that's just to brighten those two instruments up a bit. We've got some buffering going on. Anyone else getting buffering going on? I'm sorry about that, Lollipop Guild, that you're having some issues, but you said, am I invisible? Just checking. No, you are definitely not invisible. We can see you and we can see your comments. You may just need to refresh. If somebody could just let her know that perhaps she might refresh, and she should be able to get back in to the show. Okay, so there we go. That's a little bit of my perspective on attaining a depth of field. And again, using parallel compression was something that I had never really employed a lot of, and I certainly didn't do it on my original mix. But I was encouraged by Dave Vignola to give parallel compression a bit more of a try out and see if it's something that would work for some of my songs. And certainly this song, it works. I wouldn't want to try this on the title track of the EP, Belonging to Tomorrow, because that song is much more kind of open and atmospheric and jazz, much more kind of jazz orientated, whereas this is a bit more kind of little bit of jazz, little bit of pop, kind of thrown together, whereas the title track, much more jazz orientated. So parallel compression probably is something I would not do there. In fact, I don't think I did very much compression in my mix there at all. Bob Studios says, I love the idea of compression. I shall try this. Yeah, compression rocks. I'll be honest with you. Compression absolutely rocks. Your two biggest tools in your mixing toolkit is an EQ and a compressor. You can do an entire mix just with one EQ and one compressor. You absolutely can. I have done. And certainly just having just the one compressor makes you work hard about how you're going to achieve this depth of field perception by being strategic about your attack and release. Sometimes you want fast attack, sometimes you want slow, sometimes you want somewhere in the middle. If you want to park something halfway between the front and the back, go for kind of a medium style attack and release. And use the release, kind of try and use the release to kind of go with the kind of the tempo of the song. Excuse me, I've really blocked up. Sorry, I didn't want to gross you all out. but there you go. I am not very well. I'm sorry, folks. So there we go. That's pretty much as I can probably talk right now on this subject. So I will definitely take a few questions before I wrap up for the night, I'm afraid. I don't even know how many people we've got in the room. I should probably go take a look, eh? That would be a very good idea. If I can find my mouse pointer, where's it gone? There it is. Okay, let's see. We've got 17 people in here. We're a bit of a small crowd tonight. We've peaked, I think, around about 21. But yeah, we're holding steady right now at 17, which is okay. I know some people are watching Dave Vignola's stream. If you are a member of MixingMadeEasy.net, it's the coaching call tonight. But I believe that he has decided to make this open to everybody. So even if you're not a member of Mixing Made Easy, I believe the idea is that you can go and check out what the coaching call is like. Okay, let's see. Michael Johnson is here. He says, I like to send all drums to a drum bus and then create parallel drum bus with heavy compression that I can slowly bring the fader up. Yes, that's exactly what I did with Paper Deity. That's exactly how I did the drums. Now the cool thing, or the tricky thing I should say, if you've not been mixing that song or done a mix of that song, the stems are available for that still if you want to do that. And the way to do that is go to the first video in that series and follow the link in the description of that video and go and get those stems. The fun challenge of that song is the drums, and I'll tell you why it's a fun challenge. It's because there is reverb baked into those drums. And it's not fake reverb. It's not a plug-in. Let's put it like that. That's actual natural ambience of the room that we recorded the drums in. And it's baked into the recordings. You cannot get rid of it. So the trick is, when you're compressing the drums, you have to bear that in mind, that as you are compressing... Sorry, I'm adjusting my sock. It's annoying the life out of me. When you are compressing the drums, you have to bear in mind that the fact that that reverb is baked into the track. So when you are compressing, it turns up stuff as well as turn down stuff, which means that level of that baked in reverb is going to come up. So you are going to have to be particularly careful about how you deal with the compression on those drums. You want the drums to be nice and punchy and up front to a degree. But if you push the envelope too far, you'll get the reverb that's baked into the song pumping. And you don't want that. It's not very natural sounding. So you have to play a little bit of a balancing act. So the drums are really tricky. They will challenge you to get them right. They will challenge you. But it is worth sticking with and being a little bit patient. Let's see. Ken Moss says, I had to mix a solo piano song today, one stereo track. Any suggestions on pointers for doing something like that? I focus more on tone than anything else and use some reverb for depth. Pretty much, Ken, when you're dealing with a single stereo track like piano, it's easy. There's not a lot to do. Don't overthink the process. That's the big secret of mixing something that has very, very few elements to it. Don't overthink the process. Don't think you have to go and chuck, half a dozen plugins at the thing to make it work. Because you really don't. You really don't. When you've not got a whole lot of elements in your mix, that means you really aren't having to do very much other than maybe some EQ and some reverb. And if the performance is particularly dynamic, then maybe just the tiniest little, most subtle amount of compression you can get away with that is just going to tame those peaks just a bit. And that's probably it. So, Ken, really, if you just got one piano and that's it, it's easy. Bit of EQ, bit of reverb, send it off to master. Easy. So don't overthink the process when you've got few elements in your mix. That's what I'd say. Snidely says, Sunday is not the best day to do this, Johnny. It might not be the best day for you, but it is the best day for me to do it. And that's why I have done a Sunday Night Live show for, it's got to be close to 2 years now. Pretty much every Sunday. But you know what? If you are not always able to make the show, catch the replay. I leave this up on my channel indefinitely. I'm in fact building a library, a playlist on YouTube with all of my Sunday Night Lives going way back. So, going back to 2017, I think, is when we started doing these. So, yeah. If you are unable to make a show, catch the replay, and I've set it up so that you can follow the chat as well as if you're there. You just won't be able to engage in the chat, but you'll be able to follow it and see the questions and see what people are chatting about when they were live on the show. So, you can do that. Let's see. Did you try a gate on the drums? Yes, I did. And all that did was make the drums sound like they were being sucked instead of hit. It was as if somebody was picking up the snare drum and going against the snare drum head. Mika says, please can you show us the EQ and compressors you are using on the drums? They sound good. I can do that. I can definitely do that. Let's go back to Studio One. Hang on a minute. Where's my button gone? Okay. Hopefully you guys can see Studio One now. Let's go over to my drum bus. And here's my EQ. We are rolling off a little bit of 44. That's just to take away a little bit of kick drum to make way for the bass a little bit. Then we're boosting about 206 to get some of the fat girth of the snare drum. And then we're pulling out a little bit of 500. And then we are pulling out quite a bit at 1.66 because there was a ring kind of thing going on there. Didn't like it, pulled it out. Then a bit of a boost at 5K to give a little bit of sheen and sparkle, and then a little bit of air for the cymbals, but not too much, less than 2 dB, because I don't want the cymbals to end up sounding harsh. Particularly when there's a particular point where you get two crashes coming right one after the other. and they can just overwhelm if you're not careful. Compressor is the FET style 1176 style compressor, and we're doing roughly a 50 millisecond release and a 0.8 millisecond attack. So, I mean, this guy is fast. It's a fast compressor. You know, whether you have it on the slowest 0.8 millisecond setting or the 0.02 millisecond attack time, it's fast. This is way faster than most compressors, but it sounds great. It's a great sounding compressor. I love this guy. Particularly on drums, it sounds fantastic. And you probably want to also look at the parallel drums as well. I am using the MJUC Mark III by Klanghelm, made by my good buddy Tony at Klanghelm. He's a great guy. And we are slamming this sucker. I have this cranked all the way over to 48. I have these 3 buttons engaged. The density, the high ratio, and the I stage. And then we're driving it massively. And I've got the setting set on dark, the timbre setting set to dark. And then we've got the fastest attack, fastest release. And then I've got this punch thing. Don't know what this punch thing does exactly, but it does give you punch somehow. I'm not quite sure how it does it. Even with a fast attack, it still gives you loads of punch when you slam it to 3. And then we're making up some of the gain there as well. And that's the drums. So I hope that helps, Mika. And let's go back to over here. And there we go. And we are holding steady at 17 still. We peaked a little bit, back up towards 20 for a minute or two. Let's see. I don't want to miss questions whilst I'm talking. Let's go back and just check I'm not missing questions. SJ says, I like to use compression pretty sparingly on tracks. Only a couple of dB reduction, but on the parallel buses, crush the snot out of them. Yep. And certainly this style of music, that is a good approach. Let's see. Snidely says, has anyone dealt with Pro Audio Star? I've been reading bad reviews. I was going to order something from them, but maybe not. I have no idea who they are or what their business is or anything like that. So hopefully somebody else can help you out with that. Let's see. Mike says, my last couple of mixes for that sucked. I would rather work on my songwriting than mixing at the moment. You know what? I've been mixing for a very long time, and I still churn out mixes that suck. Sometimes. Not every time, but sometimes it takes a few revisions to get it right. Sometimes. Let's see. Steve Louth is here. Good to see you, Steve. Welcome. Just popping into the show. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here, Steve. Bob Studio says, regarding compression, just thought of this. Thick as a brick. That's cool. Mika says, I can't always make it for the live show, and I regret most all missed, but I'm always very happy to hear these discussions. Well, that's very cool. Thanks for the drum sound reveal. They all sounded good on your mix. Thank you very much. Yes. Because I know how I recorded those drums, and because I know the drum set, because they're my drums and my cymbal set, I kind of know what I need to do to get there with them. And the room that we recorded them in was a church hall, so I kind of knew that those things were going to be going on. And it really is a case of, with the compression in particular, you kind of have to you have to find that bite. I call it the biting point between when compression is doing too much to the ambient sound of the drums, and kind of what it's actually doing to the drums themselves. Now, sometimes certain styles of music, you might go, hey, you should have had a room mic for that church hall room. And, slam that sucker and get the most aggressive sounding room tone. Yeah, doesn't really work for this style of music. For, something a bit heavier, maybe more rock orientated, yeah, I might well have done that. Didn't in this case. In this case, I just used a kick drum mic and 2 overheads, and that was it. Bobby says, yeah, my mixes sound lousy to me, but what do I know? Yeah, I think we all do that, don't we? I think we all do that. We all listen back to our mixes and go, gosh, this sucks. And this is where using reference tracks, I think, is really important, because they help you kind of live in the real world. You know what I mean? Not mixing in isolation. Listening to what somebody else who is a lot further down the road than you and has way more experience than you, what they do with similar instrumentation and similar style material, I think is very, very helpful. In some respects, you can go, man, I'm so nowhere near as good as that guy. You could do that. You could go down that road and say, I'm just nowhere near as good as that. I'm just never going to get there. Wrong. That's the wrong way to use a reference track. The right way to use a reference track is go, that snare drum sounds freaking awesome. I'm going to listen to my snare drum, and I'm going to A-B with that snare drum, and I'm going to try and figure out the EQ parameters and the compressor and the compression settings until I get something that is as close to that sound as I can get, because that sound sounds great. And then you do the same across the board of the mix of that reference track. And I think that does 2 things. Number 1, it is an encouragement. Number 2, it helps you to listen critically, not only to your mix, but to somebody else's mix, and figure out the things that you really like, the things that you gravitate towards, and go, that really is awesome. And I want to bring that into my own mixing style and bring that into my trick bag. And the third thing it does is it helps accelerate your learning and your improving of your own mixing abilities. And again, it's experience that you gain. You put your mix up against a commercially released mix, and I think it really does help you kind of move forward faster than it does, making you go, well, that sucks, doesn't it? So it's about having the right approach, having the right attitude. And yes, having a reference track doesn't necessarily mean that you are never going to suck ever again when you do a mix, because you're a human being. We all get things wrong. We're not always in prime form some days. Some days we do a mix and we're not particularly on top of our game. So, it's the same with anything in life, You can go and play a tennis tournament and, hit every shot perfectly. Make those backhanders across court and, serve those aces pinpoint accurately. And then the next game you play, you try and play exactly the same shots and they don't come off nearly as well. And you're just like, why? Why does that happen? Why can I absolutely nail everything today, but then tomorrow I'm all over the shop? Why is that? And that's because we're human. That's just the nature of the thing. And I think it's the thing that keeps us humble and keeps our feet on the ground, I think. It's certainly what keeps me grounded. As soon as I start going, hey, I'm getting good at this, I might actually be really, really good at this. In fact, I might just be awesome at this. As soon as I start thinking that, the next mix I do sucks. I send it to the client and I think, yes, I am awesome. I'm really, really good. And then they send me a 2-page document back of, this needs changed, this needs changed. Yeah, this doesn't sound good, this doesn't sound good, this doesn't sound good. It's 2 pages long, man. But, the previous mix you did, you nailed it on the first draft and the client loved it and they paid up in full. We all live for that. We all live for those moments. But, reference tracks help you get there, I think. Bob Seger says, ego, get rid of the ego. Absolutely. Humility is the solution. If you want to be great at anything, be the least. Consider yourself least at all things if you want to be great. And I think, that goes with mixing. I think that goes with playing an instrument. That goes with being a session musician. That goes with writing songs. Anything creative that you do, if you approach it with humility and remove your ego from it, I think that's the not just it's not necessarily the fastest route to success, but I think it's the best route to long-term success is humility. It's the way to go. Chris Lord Algae will wildly disagree with that. But I think it's true. Snidely's saying don't push it. I'm not really sure what he's talking about. Lay down and die and push the tune anyway. Yes, absolutely. And yes, Jesus said that. Absolutely he did. Bobby says, what is so hard when one person says your music sounds good and then another says it sounds bad, but that happens. Helps me to get better. Yeah, absolutely. You should see my inbox, dude. You really should see my inbox. Because I get a whole bunch of people emailing me. Some of them say, you suck, you have no idea what you're doing, you're a rank amateur, you have no business doing a show where you're telling people what they should be doing. Well, they've kind of misunderstood what this show is about for a start, because this show isn't about telling you what to do. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying this is what I have found. This is what I've discovered. Try it for yourself. See if it works. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, forget about it. That's what my Sunday Night Live show is all about. It's a place where we can talk and discuss and learn together and share our ideas and share things that we've found together. And ask questions. Because, I may have things that I can share with you that you don't yet know or you haven't yet experienced. Some of you guys in the chat have been involved in the music business for as long as I have. And you've been mixing for as long as I have, or longer. And, some of you guys know more than me. But the whole reason for this show is so that you hopefully learn from me and I learn from you. If I go away from this show tonight, when I end this stream, if I have not learned anything, that's a wasted show as far as I'm concerned. I try and always learn something from somebody in the chat. And if I don't, it is a squandered opportunity, because that's why this show exists. This show exists for me to learn from you and for you to learn from me. As far as I'm concerned, it's reciprocal. So yeah, I get those kind of emails, but I do get emails where people say, hey, I really love what you do. And, I reply to those ones. The other ones I don't necessarily reply to. Mika says, quote, well, there's 16,821 guitar players in Nashville, and every one of them plays better than I will. The loving spoonful. Yeah. But you know what? Even if there really is 16,821 guitar players in your town who are all really, really, really good, here's the thing. Not a single one of them sounds like you and can play like you. Right? Nobody can play the piano the way I can. Nobody. Because I'm me. And nobody else is me as far as I know. Hopefully, I am the only me in existence. I do not have a mini-me. So, we're good on that front. So yeah. Don't be intimidated by other musicians who are really, really good. And don't think that, hey, they are just going to take all the opportunity and rob you of anything, of any opportunity to play. Have an attitude of humility. Go and approach those guys and say, hey, teach me. I want to learn. I want to learn from you. I want to get better at what I do. Can you help me? Can you help me get better at what I do? Don't go to them and say, hey, get me a gig. No. You say, hey, I want to learn. And, can we hang out so that I can learn? And, really good guitar players who are really actually good and not just arrogant buttheads, they'll say, yeah, absolutely, of course. So that's what I think. Bob Studio says, well, some of us know Mr. JL. Is that we know that you know what you're doing? Yes, I hope I know what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't, and sometimes I go into things not knowing what I'm doing, and I fly by the seat of my pants, and that's okay. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's an exciting thing to do. A couple of years ago, I don't mix EDM. I don't produce EDM. I have never touched EDM. Client comes to me and says, I listened to your record. I really quite like what you do, but I want to kind of mix what you do with EDM. Okay. He says, and I've got some songs. All right. Let's send me some rough ideas of what you got and we'll go for it. So I ended up doing an EDM record. And this guy really liked what I did to the point where he came back. And we did a second record. And now we are on our third record together. And that's done two things for me. Number one, I've learned some EDM mixing techniques. I have learned some EDM production techniques that I did not know. I had to go and listen to some EDM to figure these things out. So I was a little out of my depth, or at least I thought I was. I thought I was out of my depth. And then I went and researched and listened to a lot of EDM and made a lot of notes trying to figure out what they were doing with the mix, what they were doing with production techniques, and what they were doing musically, stylistically. And then, I borrowed some of these techniques and some of these styles, some of these things that I'd made notes on, and started to apply them to this guy's record. And obviously he liked it because he's come back for 3 more. So sometimes, if you're out of your depth, that's a good thing. Keeps you humble. They must not have heard any of your songs. Yeah, I think you may well be right there, Bobby. Mini me, you compete me. Dick Creek says, all YouTube guitar players sound the same, said the Swamp Picker. Mike has a great question. How do you not procrastinate? That's a great question. I used to just be a regular crastinator. And then I turned pro. So I'm now a procrastinator. I wrote a song all about procrastination. In fact, I wrote an entire EP called Belonging to Tomorrow. What is belonging to tomorrow? It's the literal translation of the word procrastination. It comes from the Latin. Procrastinate is the root of the word is Latin, which means it belongs to tomorrow. Putting it off to tomorrow, and of course, we all know tomorrow never comes. So I wrote an entire song about that. The first line of it is, soon I'll send that letter. Soon I'll write that letter I know I'll never send. And, that's where procrastination is. Wow, smack the mic with my fist. How do you not procrastinate? Yeah, that's a hard one, especially if it's something that you habitually do. Yeah, I'm pretty good at procrastinating, and I hate it. I have to teach myself and train myself not to do it. I have to discipline myself and say, damn it, I'm going to do that thing, and I'm going to do it today. I do that with things I don't like doing, like tax returns. Stuff like that, form filling. I recently had to renew my passport. That means I have to form fill. I hate form filling. It took me 3 weeks to fill a 2-page form. Why? Because I hate form filling, so I kept on putting it off. It took me 2 weeks, but I got it done. And I got it done in sufficient time that when my new passport comes, I'll be able to go where I need to go in September. And that's a whole nother story. Mika says, there is no doppelganger of Jonny Lipsham, one of a kind. Well, thank you very much. That's very awesome of you to say so. Mika says, make a calendar. Yeah, make a calendar. But don't just make a calendar. That's a great place to start. Set yourself some fake deadlines. In fact, go one step better than just setting fake deadlines. Set fake deadlines and then tell the world about it. Go on YouTube, do a live stream and say, I'm going to release X, Y, and Z on X, Y, and Z date. You will be able to get it. I will make it available to you. You'll be able to have that. Whatever that thing is. If it's a video series, if it's, I don't know, you're going to commercially release a song. Do it. Have a release date and work backwards. Go, okay, I'm going to release an EP on September the 30th. Okay, what do I need to do? These are my steps. This is when the writing phase needs to be done by. This is when recording needs to be done by. This is when mixing needs to be done by. This is when mastering needs to be done by. And I need to give a little bit of buffer room on each one of those deadlines to budget for the unforeseen. Like I may need to go and re-record something, or mixing may take a little bit longer because I may find it a little bit more of a challenge on a particular song, you know, and then give yourself a couple of days. So try and have everything done 2 days before your deadline that you have set yourself. And then that gives you 2 days of rest and recuperation and relaxation. There, I've done it. I've achieved it. And then you put it out. I did that in 2016. I said, I'm going to release an EP on X date. And that's exactly what I did. I told the world about it, and I released my EP on, I think it was May the 8th, 2016. So I am doing an EP this year, by the way, and it will be out on September 30th. Okay? I'm leading by example. That's what I do. Even if it kills me, I'll lead by example. So I'm going to put an EP out of four, maybe 5 songs on September 30th. And I am going to make it available for sale so you guys can purchase it if you are interested in that. But I need to work backwards and work those stages backwards. And here we are, July 7th. Yeah, my September 30th deadline's coming up fast. I need to get writing. Yes, I need to get recording fairly soon too. So there you go. I hope that helps. Let's see. I can't seem to get stuff finished consistently. I start new things and give it up a few weeks later. Feel like my motivation only works for a couple of weeks at a shot. Well, you know what? If that's what happens, if that's your cycle, your creative cycle is a 2-week window, you need to make the best use of that 2-week window. Okay? And then gradually, the more you train those creative muscles and the more you motivate those creative muscles, the longer that window will get. It will get bigger. It will get bigger. And that, that period of, wilderness in between will get shorter and shorter. It's about exercising the muscles and, training yourself. It's like, training to be an athlete. It's like you don't go and win the Olympic gold at the 200 meters hurdles without doing any training. You will die before you even get to the track. So... you have to put in the time, you have to put in the discipline, you have to put in the effort and the hard work. And, the public see you in the stadium going through the, going through the competition until you get to the final. And it's the final where you get the chance to win that medal. But you have to put in all of that effort before you get there. Being creative is exactly the same thing as athletics. It requires the same amount of discipline. Mentally, to start with, and physically and emotionally second. Train yourself. And you'll get there. You'll get it done. Mika says, gotta go. Been procrastinating on dinner. Have a great evening to all. Thanks for the good convo and tips. Cool. Awesome. Okay, we are 12 minutes over time, and I wasn't really sure how long I would last, but you guys have kept me on my toes and kept me entertained, so thank you very much for that. And I want to say thank you very much for everybody's generosity recently, the last couple of months with Super Chats. You guys have been amazing. And really, really, it's actually been really, really helpful. Because, you know, some unexpected things have popped up, which have made life a bit of a challenge for us financially. And so you have no idea how much your generosity has blessed me and my wife and kids. So thank you so very much. And, you know, show after show, if it's something you like to do and if it's something you enjoy doing, is hitting the super chat, then feel free to do so. I am blessed when you do. But on that note, I'm going to be starting to put out some videos on Thursdays again. I kind of taken a little hiatus, 5 or 6 week hiatus from making my tutorial videos, mostly because my kids are on summer holidays and it's a little bit harder to get videos done. But I am going to be batch shooting them, so they'll be coming out regularly over the next several weeks now on Thursdays. So I will see you guys on Wednesday on the Songwriting Simplified show over on the Home Studio Trainer channel. That'd be cool. Looking forward to that. We've got some interesting stuff that we are planning for that, by the way, over the next couple of weeks. So if you're into songwriting and arranging, get yourself over onto that show on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central. My voice is about to give out, so I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for the great chat and for your company, all sort of 20 or so of you. Thanks a lot, folks. I'll see you on Wednesday. Good night. Oh, I forgot the music, didn't I? That was daft. Ha ha ha.